Okay, when I hear that voice saying the recording is in progress, that usually means that I'd best get started. Uh, Good afternoon. I guess we have a group of gentlemen this afternoon. My name is Roger, and we'll be talking about some ethics for the next couple hours. I notice we have a group, relatively small group, so that we can keep this uh, informal to a reasonable extent. Ethics is something that's interesting to talk about and have some exchange of ideas. So feel free to let me know if there's something you want to talk about a little more. We're going to cover some interesting material here that is a little bit different from the traditional ethics thing, but I think that it's pretty applicable. I had a back in my university days, I had a favorite professor, a friend of mine over in the philosophy department, and we used to get together and have some interesting discussions. And then, of course, when the engineering ethics became required as part of the content for a degree program, I got the honor of coming up with the course for the department. So, anyway, this all spin off, and some of this material comes from that course, including the textbook. But ethics is something that presumably doesn't change, although it's not clear in terms of, well, on my definition, I haven't seen any change, but I'm not sure that everyone agrees with that. I don't know. We'll see. We can talk about that. Anyway, so Bart, Brian, Dan, Dave, David, Hardy, Herman, Jerome, Roger, welcome to the group. And we can, like I say, there are several communication means. Let's save the chat box for the hosts in case we have any technical issues we want to discuss. And let's use the up in the upper right hand box, you got the Q&A under more. So if you want to type your question, do it in the Q&A, and we'll deal with it there. Part of that is that I have an issue with my ears. I've had a little infection in one of them, and so understanding is not necessarily easy. So just to make sure that I understand exactly, but otherwise, don't hesitate to break in with your microphone. By the way, the this presentation is available for download if there's anything in it you'd like to pick up on after the program is over. And there are some appending slides that we won't be discussing, which is essentially the total content of the 2020 version of the American Society of Civil Engineers Code of Ethics. Okay, so with that, let's get started. And as I say, don't hesitate to just open your mic and say, "Hey, Roger," or whatever it takes to get my attention, and we'll worst. I used to tell my students the worst question you can ask is the one you don't ask, because that's what you're paying your tuition for, be able to ask questions. So, um, there's a few examples of possible ethical problems that have been out there for a while, like these, starting back in 1903. I'm going to move my closed captions as I don't really need to see what I said. No, it's there. I'm going to leave it. um, Way back 1903, they've been documenting various things, but apparently not much happened between 1903 and 1967. But boy, once they 1967, then lots of things started going on that people paid attention to, including all these things with except unless they have an asterisk, it's not in the reference, but otherwise there's one reference that contains a lot of this information that you'll be able to look up if you have any interest in any of these other issues. You may, in fact, have attended some uh, ethics courses on things like the Columbia disaster. That's one that I particularly remember because I was walking across my campus that day when that thing blew up in the air, and I saw that happen, and that was really, I don't know, I can hardly describe the feeling. But in any case, let's uh, this book here by Charles Flutterman, and the asterisks are other references that will come along with the material as we approach it. Um, but this is a Flutterman book, and I'm not sure whether he has a later edition out, but this edition had a fair amount of good material. And like I say, presumably ethics is not something that changed quite as fast as, say, photovoltaics or any number of other modern engineering issues. So we're looking at some things that have been around for a while. Not that there haven't been different ethical issues that have happened. Anyway, if we're going to talk ethics, it's interesting to start with the definition, one of which might be it's the discipline dealing with what's good or bad or right and wrong or moral duty or an obligation and so on and so forth. That's a pretty good philosophical definition. And then there's one a little more practical. It says the principles of conduct governing an individual or a profession. And matter of fact, we just got a code of conduct for our condominium here that's been passed by our board. So even condominiums seem to do ethics now. And that's kind of protect the poor people who work here from some of the people who live here, I guess. So I didn't write it, by the way, somebody else did. And then there's being in accord with the approved standards of behavior or a socially or professionally accepted code. I'm sorry, I thought I was done coughing for the day. So in any case, here we have our justification inside the purple uh, rectangle here with rounded corners. Based on Webster's Third New International Dictionary. I wanted to make sure everybody saw a picture of it since we're all used to using, we don't use dictionaries anymore. We tend to just go to see what we can find on the web. But maybe that's why they named it the web after Webster. Who knows? Anyway, we define and accept fundamental principles, like maybe something like engineers govern their professional careers on the following fundamental principles. Okay, well, what might be some good ideas? Well, here's one. How about create safe, resilient, and sustainable infrastructures? Or maybe treat all persons with respect, dignity, and fairness in a manner that fosters equitable participation without regard to personal identity. Got to be careful with these words like equitable and all, but still, it's here in the ethics. So I'm just repeating what's written down about how to describe something like ethics. Or consider the current and anticipated needs of society. Well, yeah, that's kind of important. And I said or, but and or. Then there's utilizing your knowledge and skills to enhance the quality of life for humanity. Well, we all like to do that. And so now that we have those principles, we convert them to a code because how do you do that stuff? Well, this is how ASCE did it as of October 26th in 2020. And whether or not you're civil, if you're IEEE, ASME, NSPE, they've all got their codes of ethics. So, the civil is a little more concise and than the others that tend to be slightly more wordy. But they all have the pretty much same idea of those main principles. So ASCE starts off by saying the stakeholders, in terms of the implication or implementation of this code, are in the following priority. Society. Okay, society is first. So first, society has to be happy with our work. And then the natural and built environment needs to be happy. So this sort of implies Mother Nature. We're going to say a little more about that toward the end. And then there's the part about the profession. But profession is number 3 on the list. No, society is first, then the clients and the employers. In other words, you might try to make your client happy, but your client may not be happy in the process of making society happy. And then you get yourself an interesting toss up there. How do you deal with that? We're going to talk about some of those dilemmas. And then there's the peers. There's those folks who sit in the office next to you, or for those of you who work at home, there's the people who you talk to on Zoom meetings at least once a week, maybe once a day. So once we do that, those are some of the priorities. So now, what are the things that we're going to prioritize? The previous version, up until 2020, there were 8 canons that were very nice because they listed 8 different things. And we're going to go back to that again because, once again, presumably ethics is something that doesn't change a whole lot. Just like certain codes of other things, like National Electrical Code, doesn't change a whole lot, other than adding some new stuff every year and maybe explaining some stuff and maybe deleting some old stuff after once it's no longer used. But usually the old stuff gets kept just in case there's some of the old stuff still around. Okay, so what do some of the human ethical theories include? Well, one is called utilitarianism. And utilitarianism says that actions are good that serve to maximize human well-being. As an example, finding a place to store nuclear waste or using eminent domain to build a freeway. Utilitarianism. Okay, we want to maximize the benefit to overall human well-being. Then there's the cost-benefit analysis thing. You're probably all pretty familiar with that. You determine the costs and benefits and maximize the ratio, sort of like utilitarianism. Utilities do this all the time in terms of how much money do we have to spend trimming the trees in order to make sure that the lines don't fall when the hurricane comes or when the earthquake comes or when the fires come. And the automobile makers use this frequently and so forth. But sometimes the benefits are difficult to quantify, such as what if you get cleaner air from a hybrid or an electric vehicle? How do you quantify that? So that's interesting from a cost-benefit analysis. Folks have worked at that. Then there's the duty and rights ethics, which says actions are good that respect the rights of the individual. I'm sorry about the cough. Let me try some water here. So duty ethics implies all people have the duty to protect the rights of others. And rights ethics implies people have fundamental rights that others have the duty to protect. Okay, and again, that's kind of an open statement because we have to decide which those rights are and what these duties are and all. But the idea sounds pretty good, at least. That my gosh, I mean, I've got my rights, you got your rights, and let's just respect each other's rights as long as we don't step on each other's toes, sort of thing. And then there's the virtue ethics that says actions are right if they support good character and wrong if they support bad character. So in other words, they're based on individual behavior. Virtue ethics, that sounds like maybe the kind that apply to politicians or something like that. But I guess they probably apply to engineers and a lot of other people as well. So but see, this is not, engineers' codes of ethics are not the only ones around. This is a building on the north shore of Great Bear Lake up in the village of, it's not pronounced D-Line, it's pronounced Delaney. And this nice little village is on Great Bear Lake. in the Canadian Northwest Territories. And this village happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site, ooh, which I spelled wrong, and which means that they are self-governing within the realm of the government of Canada. But these folks have put together their own code of ethics that looks like this. They call it laws, and pretty straightforward. Share what you have, help each other, love each other as much as you can. Be respectful of elders and everything around you. Boy, 82-year-old guy like me really likes that one. Sleep at night and work during the day. That's pretty neat. Be polite. Don't argue with anyone. Have rational discussions. Don't raise your voice. Stuff like that. Young girls and boys should behave respectfully. That's a very nice thought. Pass on the teachings and be happy all the time. And to walk around this village, you'd think these people actually believed it because this is pretty much what you see. So put down some guidelines, and sometimes they're pretty straightforward for following. Basically, the experience we had when we were there. I say we, the co-author of this presentation, she's not part of the presentation, but I want her name on it because material at the end on ecofeminism, she inspired me and provided me with a lot of material. So Jane, whose name is on the front cover, you'll see her picture a couple of times as long as we go along here. Anyway, there and beyond the Dene laws, there are others. There's the Ten Commandments, the Golden Rule, and lots of others, IEEE codes of ethics, and so forth. So lots of ethics, lots of codes. Pretty much all saying the same thing, though. Respect each other's rights. Do the right thing. Ooh, you do the right thing. Just that's something to keep in mind. Just keep on doing the right thing, whatever that might be. And that's where we're going to look at some of those dilemmas today. There's also sustainability and environmental ethics. I kind of like Delaney, so here's a picture of the airport. And this gentleman here was on the town commission. What you see in the pan there is some nice fresh lake trout, which incidentally, as part of a World Heritage Site, they're supposed to be self-supporting, self-sufficient, and meaning they don't ship this out. If you want to eat lake trout from Great Bear Lake, you go to Delaney and get invited to dinner somewhere because they don't even serve this in a restaurant. Unless maybe they do now, but they didn't back when we were there a few years back. So anyway, it's a very interesting place, and I talk about it in terms of sustainability because this is presumably a sustainable location here where they pretty much cover all their needs. But then again, sustainability has an interesting way of being looked at because what it really means is they meet their own needs, but occasionally they import some stuff from other places, but in return they send some stuff back to those other places. And we've had kind of some stuff about that with tariffs and things here in the United States. And it kind of relates to sustainability, but the main thing is sustainability means, I don't know if anybody needs a definition on that. It means that it means you can keep on doing it for a long time without messing things up. Anyway, from Canon number 1 from ASCE, there is words that says strive to comply with the principles of sustainable development. Okay, so that's nice. We'll look at, well, for example, is exponential growth. That's what everybody's demanding. The economy has to grow by 2% every year. Hey, but that's exponential. 3%, whatever it is. I want my bank account to increase by that. I want this to increase by. It's so much exponential stuff. The question is it sustainable? It's interesting to look at if the population of the planet continues growing at doubling rate every 30 years. Where would we be in 400 years? And it turns out that we'd have about 100 square feet per person on the planet. So something in that neighborhood. I did an analysis a few years back. I don't remember the exact numbers, but sustainable is an interesting question. How about climate change? Is that related to sustainability? Well, maybe. Transportation, sustainable is what we're doing now. Is that sustainable? Maybe not. If we keep burning oil, maybe we might run out. Maybe something else might happen. So, is that a good idea? And if sustainability is a part of ethics, if it's something we're supposed to practice, then we start asking questions about some of the things that we do as a civilization and a population. Energy? Well, is any kind of energy sustainable? Presumably we'll run out of the fossil fuels. Even the sun is only going to last another 4.5 billion years. But is there such a thing as sustainable energy? What about construction? What about water? Cape Town, Africa, a few years back had some serious problems. And if you kind of dig in a little bit, if you read that Iran right now has some very serious water problems. So something there must not be sustainable. Mining ethics, we're going to take a look at a mining situation. What does it really mean? And if something is sustainable, does that mean it's ethical necessarily? Well, good question. Have to take a look at it kind of on a one-by-one individual basis. So let's look at some details of Canon 1. First, there's 8 of these, okay? 1, engineering deals with structures, machines, products, and devices that may affect the lives and safety, health, and welfare of the general public. Okay, that's fine. Nobody argues with that. We absolutely do that stuff. So what about it? Well, that would mean that we should only approve or seal documents personally reviewed or prepared in accordance with accepted codes and standards, because after all, if we're concerned about the health and welfare of the public, then that's what these standards were developed for and these codes were developed for. Okay, so certainly we do that. And this is no surprise. That's part of the ethical thing. The question is, are we ever asked to seal something that doesn't do that? And what if that's the case? What do we do? Then there's the part about employing and informing employers or clients of possible consequences if their judgment is on issues relating to health, safety, or welfare are overruled. And of course, this is the one that where the Challenger incident comes in, and most everybody has read that story about the folks at Morton Thiokol, where the engineer said, "Hey, you shouldn't fly that bird today. It is too cold. Those O-rings are not designed for this," and they were overruled. And the engineers tried hard here, so it didn't work. So where, could they have done more? Whatever. I'm sure they're wondering if they could have done more. And I wish I could have met some of those guys. Anyway, another one, report apparent violations of Canon 1 in writing to the proper authority. We're going to talk a little more about that later, about what happens when you do that. Sometimes. Participate in constructive public service activity involving enhancement of community safety, health, well-being, and protection of environment through practicing sustainable development. What does this mean anyway to do that? Well, maybe you could serve on an advisory board or something about developing a new development that maybe we should have zero energy buildings here. So, when you have a chance to get the word in, maybe we keep this Canon 1 in mind. Adhere to the principles of sustainable development or to enhance quality of life for the general public. So here's a question. Which ethical theory applies here? And just as a reminder, let's see what they are again. Utilitarianism, cost-benefit analysis, duty and rights ethics, virtue ethics. So adhering to the principles of sustainable development. Go ahead, open your mics. What do you think? And it doesn't, it's okay if more than one applies. So which one or ones do you think apply to the sustainable development thing? Here they are. Any comments? What do you think? Okay, I see somebody popped in there with something. And then let me find that Q&A. Uh, oh, you don't see a microphone option on your Zoom. Oh, uh, Mr. Host, can you put something in the chat that tells people where the microphones are that they can turn on to, I think that's in the participant box, isn't it? I'm not sure. Uh, Go up, find the participant box and drag that down. See if you have a microphone next to your name. And if so, okay, duty and rights, okay. And duty and rights is you say is a good one in terms of what we were just talking about. Respect the rights of the individual. How does that work into sustainability, though? See, sustainability is kind of interesting. None of these really look very close, but then look at utilitarianism. Actions are good that serve to maximize human well-being. Well, one could argue that an extension of that would be human well-being would be the well-being of the planet, because after all, if the planet is in good shape, then humans should be in relatively good shape. But in any case, it's interesting to try to categorize these various things in terms of these four different ethical theories. So others should be able to enjoy them too. So exactly, others and others, meaning like 100 years from now. So, and anyway, this is one of the interesting, I call it challenge if you want. Uh, I got to click a couple of things here. Okay. So let's move on to the next issue here. Hold safety paramount. And how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we have to know what is safe. And then what is safe enough? I mean, we just don't want people to fall off a roof. We don't want people to get in a car accident. We don't want people to burn themselves on their electric range. We don't want, all kinds of things like this. We don't want to create air that people can't that breathe and gives them cancer or chemicals or something like that. So, but can anything be completely safe? We talk about self-driving cars. Are they completely safe? Not yet. Maybe one day. Maybe more safe than human-driven. How about air travel and rail travel? Pretty safe until you start reading stories about uh, the high-speed rail between Miami and Orlando, Florida. That rail travel doesn't sound too terribly safe, and are there any issues there? That'll be another interesting topic one day. Somebody's going to pick up on that. There are a lot of grade crossings, and people see the thing go down, and they're used to waiting for a freight train, so then they kind of sneak around the gates, and then all along comes this high-speed train, and generally the train is the winner, and generally the vehicle is the loser. And they've had that has happened a lot of times in the grade crossings. What's the deal here? What are the ethical things? And that's another interesting topic for another day that might be discussed. But in any case, how safe should these things be? How safe do they need to be? Well, for one thing, high-speed rails in other countries, Italy, China, and so forth, generally don't have any railroad grade crossings where you have to stop for the train to come by. There's a bridge or a tunnel or something the train goes through. Chemical plants, power plants, cell phones, all of them. How safe are cell phones? Boy, that's an experiment we're doing with the hundreds of millions and billions of people doing that experiment to see whether you fry your brains if you hold them close to your brains. I don't know if there's any data on that yet. I do know what the engineers at Motorola who did the analysis, simply E is equal to H nu, and forget about anything, any excited states or anything like that. But anyway, can anything be said completely safe? And how acceptable safety limits? How do you determine them? What are the premises of risk analysis? And we're going to talk about Fukushima a little bit and the Chevrolet ignition switch, not much at all. You might remember the Chevrolet ignition switch thing was that they could have put a few more bucks into the thing to make it more reliable, but since only once in a while did the thing quit in the middle of an intersection, maybe that wasn't worth it to go to the bother of adding an extra couple of dollars to improving the switch because of the amount of additional costs of the machine. That was an interesting ethical thing at the time. Um, and so let's talk a little bit about Fukushima. One might think this book might be ever so slightly prejudiced because it was uh, published by way of the Union of Concerned Scientists, and they're concerned about nuclear things. But when you read it, and it's a very interesting read, they've got a lot of factual stuff in here, and some of the stuff that's in this book is pretty interesting to look at. For example, um, reactor owners falsified reports. Well, that doesn't sound very ethical. Regulators failed to scrutinize safety claims. Let's see, what was Fukushima again? Oh, yeah, that was that nuclear accident in Japan where it just turned out that the thing had been designed for what they weren't really prepared for was a tsunami. And this tsunami came along and it just kind of did a number on this the plant and then a lot of damage we'll see later. um, Earthquake, they were earthquake proof, but you know, we have to look at combinations of disasters. If you have an earthquake under the ocean, there's a pretty good chance you're going to get a tsunami. So even though it may have been inland a ways, that water from the ocean got in there and it created havoc. So the other thing about Fukushima is the nuclear boosters dominated the safety panels. And you've probably heard about similar things happening elsewhere. And another thing that happened was that their rules were buried for years in endless committee reviews. And that doesn't sound too surprising either, does it? And the independent experts were, in fact, financially beholden to the industry for jobs or research funding. So if you didn't tell it the way they wanted to hear it, then you probably didn't have a job next week doing analyzing, whatever. So you kind of needed to, whatever you found, you kind of had to conclude in a way that they were going to hire you to do your job again. And there were these public meetings where folks with from the industry were posing as ordinary citizens. This would never happen in the United States, certainly not in a hearing about, say, a data center or something like that, but it sure did happen in Japan. And believe it or not, there were political donations to members of the Nuclear Safety Commission. I wonder who those donations came from. Why, my goodness. I suspect, though, and you probably have an idea of who I think we're talking about here. So let's look at a whistleblowing example from Fukushima. It's on page 48 of that book. This is our friend who was a nuclear inspector working for General Electric at Fukushima, and he noticed a crack in the reactor's steam dryer. And, they're not supposed to have cracks. And so, but Tokyo Electric Power Company was not happy with this gentleman's observation, so they told him, "Hey, cover this up, man. We don't need that right now." And so that he, being a good engineer, filled with ethics, he went to the government and said, "Hey, guys, we've got issues here." And boy, then they went to TEPCO and said, "Okay, you guys, you take care of this, all right?" And of course they did. They fired the guy. But then again, 2 years later, they said, well, actually, we have been falsifying our safety records for a long time. So interesting how these things play out, isn't it? Yeah. And you may have heard of similar examples. I'm not sure whether anyone in this group has been involved in anything similar. Thank God I have not, but it would not have been fun to have been in this kind of a position. Anyway, Fukushima, if you're interested in seeing what's going on there now, you can get more information. Um, we have some ideas of some of the ethical dilemmas that were present as a result of this thing happening. Not as a result of it happening, but maybe if they paid a little more attention to what was going on, maybe it wouldn't have happened. The International Atomic Energy, or IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Administration has a news center, and they keep track of Fukushima. So if you want to find out what happened there yesterday, go to this site. And this is way back in 2016, 4 years later, but there was still 750,000 tons of contaminated water being stored. They've been getting rid of this contaminated water a small amount at a time, dumping it into the ocean, hoping it will dilute and spread out all over the place so that it won't cause any major localized damages. But it's going to take 40 years to clean this thing up. And as of 2015, 100,000 people still couldn't go home. The ones who did go back, either too old or the people going there to clean it up. And there's a lot of soil in bags still awaiting disposal. And again, here's a reference for you if you're interested. So again, engineers trying to do the right thing, but there's other things out there that sometimes get in the way. And how do you deal with that? And I don't have an answer for that, but this is food for thought. That's the reason the title on this is food for thought, because it's something to think about. That if you were confronted with a situation like that, how would you deal with it? Canon 2. Seems like we're going a little slower, but we'll be moving a little quicker. We want to get the idea down here, and then we'll be able to go through things a little bit faster. Qualification may be by education or experience. Okay. It's okay to be a part of a project team as long as each player has a different position, and you only seal the documents that lie within your established expertise. Okay. That sounds pretty straightforward, but there are a couple of questions that might go along with this, like what does competence really mean? If you have a PhD degree in mechanical engineering, does you mean you're also good in electrical engineering? Does it mean you're competent in every area of mechanical engineering? Probably not. What does it really mean? And who decides? How do you establish it? Who judges it? What's the responsibility of the individual? We seem to have worked this out, but these are non-trivial situations here. Who judges when competence is received? Yeah, well, we have committees and so folks who make this judgment. You pass your PE test, you apparently have some competence somewhere. What's your personal responsibility? Well, I think it kind of, probably gets into the idea that you kind of have to know what you know and know what you don't know. But the hard part is not knowing what you don't know, because there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't know that we don't know. And wow, you don't really realize that until it comes up. Uh, so, in any case, that we individually we have some responsibility here, and we need to figure out how do we apply this responsibility. Canon 3, endeavor to be honest with the public on engineering and sustainability, include all relevant information, testify only on the facts, identify revenue sources if somebody pays you, if you're paid consultant, for example. Um, but above all, you put the profession above all, and absolutely above your own self-interest. So even if you have to say, I was wrong, or this was wrong, you may not get hired again, but at least you said the right thing if indeed you believed it was wrong, because what you've done is foregone the self-interest part and put the profession above and say, well, at least this guy is an engineer who uh, follows his ethical guidelines. Well, and like we say, it should be easy, but outside pressure. I want to show you a water heater test report here in a minute, and we'll see about what happens with that. Let's take a look at it. And then what is spinning a statement? I think we hear a lot about that lately. Uh, you just word it so that it's positive, whether it's negative or otherwise. You just have to word it properly. And of course, we have ChatGPT to do that now for us. That's another interesting ethical issue that could be a whole topic of another full webinar probably. But let's look at this water heater timer test. This was interesting because I've done water heater timer tests. And I mean, I've done energy efficiency and renewable energy stuff since 1975. So this stuff was pretty familiar when I read this test. Report was about 8 pages long. The idea here was we're going to have the same supply water at same temperature for two identical water heaters, one of which is going to have a timer on it and one of which is not, each of which has a very accurately calibrated energy meter, a kilowatt hour meter on it, or power meter, whatever you want to call it. And each one has its pail that measures very precisely the amount of hot water that comes out of the tank. And here's the test. The test is to find out at the end of a day's time, if you have a timer on your water heater, will you save 30% on your use of hot water? And this test was performed, and indeed they found out you did save 30%. Now, let me give you the conditions here. These were all totally identical, except for one little thing that was mentioned on page 8 of the report after all of the positive results were already listed. And that is, the heater on the left was set for 120 degrees, and the heater on the right was set for 140 degrees. Yeah, pretty minor difference. Two water heaters and the same amount of hot water and all. And after all, it doesn't take any more electricity to heat water to a 140 than 120, does it? Or does it? So in any case, uh, it turns out if you do the math, if your starting temperature about 70 degrees, then 70 to 140, there's 70 degrees. 70 to 120 is 50 degrees. Just about 30%, isn't it? So now, if you put a timer on a solar water heater so that the electricity backup doesn't come on until after the sun goes down, then you give the sun to do its job. The first sun gets first chance to do its job during the day. And if the sun doesn't do it, then the heater heats it. And it shuts off again at 10 o'clock at night so that by the time morning is around, the water in the tank is ready to be heated up again by the sun. So as long as you can adjust the timing on the timer along with the water heater use, then A timer is a good deal. This experiment I did myself with my own solar water heater, and it worked fine. I got 90% of my water was made by the sun without the timer or with the timer. But when the timer came on early in the morning after we used hot water, then the water heater control system said, well, the water still in the tank is still warmer than the stuff up on the roof, so you don't need to circulate yet. Anyway, this was an interesting situation, and the way it was worded, it was just it was the report was flavored to make the timer people happy. And of course, it was accurate because it did talk about the temperature difference between the two tanks, except it was buried in the report where probably nobody saw it. Well, that's not accurate that nobody saw it because I saw it. And that's why I'm talking about this right here today, because it's an example of coloring the result in favor of the person paying for the experiment. Then there's the Theranos thing about Elizabeth Holmes. Some of you may have read about her recently. Um, and this is interesting too, because we're talking about a woman now instead of a man. And do we treat women different from men? That's a totally different story. We'll talk about that later. But still, uh, she started this company, but the company fell apart in 2015 because it found out that they misrepresented its blood testing technology. And the Security and Exchange Commission charged her with fraud, stripped her controlling stake in the company, fined her for $500,000, and said, you can't be an officer for another 10 years. Well, 10 years later, she became an officer, and there's been some things now being written about her. But in any case, it's just one of those things of misrepresenting your product. And it's we're not even sure that she was necessarily an engineer, but still, uh, it's one of those things you're just not supposed to do, especially with blood tests. My goodness, that's people. I think what does that mean? Back to the Village of Widows, another interesting story. Um, this looks familiar, maybe. This is the Bear River coming out of Bear Lake at Delaney again. Had the pleasure of having a boat ride to see this lovely waterway. This is the northwest corner of the lake, and this is the way uh, ore boats were carrying ore out of the area from the southeast corner of the lake way back. Because this is where uranium, one of the places where uranium for the Manhattan Project was mined, near the southeast corner of Great Bear Lake. So the boats had to go across the lake, straight, kind of like across the lake to go down the river to transport their ore to where it can be refined and enriched. And in any case, these mines were the indigenous people in the area were the ones who worked at the mines. And 20 years later or so, a lot of these guys died of cancer, and that's why they called the place the Village of Widows. But the heart-wrenching part of this whole thing is that after the survivors, the women essentially realized what had happened and what the reasons were, they got together, took a trip to Japan, and said, we are sorry. And that is incredible. But in any case, it's a very interesting story about what happens when you got this mission at hand. Uh, the ethics here presumably would be an ethics that this is what's best for mankind to do this thing. So some people might get hurt, but overall it's best for everybody. But here's what happens to those for whom it's not necessarily the best. So then we go to Yellowknife, which is kind of on the way up to Delaney. And Yellowknife's a pretty nice place. This is downtown Yellowknife. I think this is the city hall, main office center, and there's a very, very nice area around City Hall where people set up, just kind of hang out. And real nice modern city. Um, condominiums and apartments overlooking the Yellowknife River for people who work there and live there. Uh, the old town uh, from way back in the old days of exploring the Canadian Northwest Territories, where they just finally got tired of people spitting on the floor and put up a sign, you can't do that anymore. And this is the lady who made this trip with, whose name is on the first page. There were mosquitoes there, but it's pretty nice territory. And this is one of the more enjoyable trips we had. And then on the way back from this beautiful river, you see things like Great Bear. This is Great Slave Lake here at Yellowknife. And then up northeast of town, though, you're driving home back to town, and you see these signs that say danger, keep out, contaminated area, and you think, I wonder what that is. And then a couple miles later, you see another one, danger, keep out, contaminated area. It looks like a pretty big area. Wonder what this is. So you go downtown and you look around and you start asking questions. Hey, what are all these signs about over there in the northeast corner of town on the road out of town? And you find out this Yellowknife story, and it goes like this. Between 1935 and 2004, there were 7 million ounces of gold mined, and it came from arsenopyrite ores, means that you got a combination of arsenic and gold, which means nobody really wants the arsenic. Well, some people might, but most people prefer not to have it, but they're happy with the gold, so you have to separate them out. So the way you do it was high heat. And what happens when you do that is you oxidize the arsenic to arsenic trioxide. And the result of that was that they made 237 kilotons of arsenic trioxide in the process of getting at gold. And here's the story that's on a little poster in a small office downtown Yellowknife. And some of the details, this tells you about arsenic trioxide. All right. And up to 99.7% of this were captured. They just didn't let it go into the atmosphere. I mean, they found out about it pretty fast, and so they started capturing it. Okay. And so that was really good thing that they did that. People apparently didn't feel real good after they came near the place when the arsenic was being released to the atmosphere. So there's your 237,000 tons, okay, metric tons. And the thing about arsenic trioxide, it's water soluble. So one thing you can do with it is you put it in water and you simply store it in 14 underground chambers. Except for one little thing, there are hundreds and hundreds of lakes in the vicinity of Yellowknife, maybe even thousands. And not a whole lot is known about the water table there. And so this water stored in the underground chambers under Yellowknife could very well have been soaking its way into some of these nice lakes where people go fishing for all these good fish up in the northern part of the country. And so it was thought maybe we better do something about that. So then what they did was they decided maybe we should freeze this stuff. So if you look at you happen to drive by the northeast corner of Yellowknife, you'll see a pretty good sized substation, and that substation feeds the compressors that keep that water frozen down there. And 14 underground chambers of frozen water under Yellowknife. They say that it's enough to kill everyone on the planet something like 7 times. Probably also enough to make some pretty good gallium arsenide solar stuff. So it is a good supply of arsenic as long as it doesn't get out. But it's taken a fair amount of energy to keep it cold and keep it contained. And by the way, when they finished mining the gold, the owner just kind of walked away and said, "Okay, guys, it's your problem now." We're going to move to another place, and maybe we'll just even change our name so nobody can find us, and who knows what. Is that ethics or what? Anyway, here's the Yellowknife folks stuck with this problem. They're dealing with it, but it is going to take a little while to get this thing solved. Permanent solution, who knows what. Meanwhile, we keep those chillers working. So, and the way it works is we have the giant mine oversight board, and they are tasked with what to do with this stuff. Canon 4, avoid conflicts of interest. Oh my goodness, whoever would heard of imagine doing anything like that. Let's see, we're going on 3 o'clock. We got an hour to go. We're good. There's eight cannons and a little more stuff, so we're okay on time. Let me just break. Anybody have anything here you want to take a look at or emphasize before we move into Canon 4 on any of the previous material? Any questions, any discussion? If you found out, I'm going to see if I can, I'm going to go to the participant box here and see, let's see if I go to panelists. Yeah, I think if you go to participant box, you will find next to your name an opportunity to raise your hand or to turn on your microphone. I'm pretty sure. At least I have that as a panelist, and I have a feeling the host can make that available to participants. Otherwise, if that doesn't work, feel free to go to the Q&A. And if you have anything you want to talk about, let's take a little break here and see if what we might want to discuss about material we've covered so far. Is it something that is maybe a little different from what you've seen before? Do you see the kinds of dilemmas that I'm trying to point out that, and have you any similar experiences you had you might like to share? Uh, Let me move here to Q&A and see what we can see. No open questions. Okay, what about the chat box? That's just one comment from the host that says, please use Q&A if you'd like to speak. So yeah, if you'd like to speak, raise hand because we can't open all the mics at the same time. That ends up with issues with echoes and stuff like that. All right, well, I don't know whether to conclude that I have put everybody to sleep already or not. Wow. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on from here. Canon 4 says avoid conflicts of interest, whether real or perceived. That's an interesting real or perceived comment. One job involving more than one party pays unless all other payments are disclosed to all. Okay, yeah, that kind of no tips or gifts. Yeah, okay, sure, that makes sense. If in government in any capacity, don't hire your own company. Oh, well, nobody would ever do that, of course. Um, advise employ. But what if your company is the only one who can do what the government needs to get done? Okay, here we've got somebody. Let's see what we got. Q&A. Still here enjoying lecture. Well, gee, I like to hear that, Herman. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see if we can keep that going. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, advise employers and client when it is felt a project will not succeed. Hey man, I don't think we can do this. That's all right. We're getting paid for it. We got to try anyway. Well, so what are some of the possible complications here? Like what might be an unfaithful act? Hmm. I mean, if you're married or something, you think of unfaithful acts and all that. An unfaithful act in business in terms of What is it? I mean, could there be something I never heard of here? We have to make a decision. It might have to be done fairly quickly. So we need to be thinking about what does this mean about no unfaithful acts? Is there a limit to loyalty? It's a point where, you're just really fed up with the boss. You can't stand it. Or something else that's going on, what do you do? Engineer, management, customer relationships, all these kinds of things they can get pretty complex. What's a tip or a gift? We'll talk about that a little bit. Where do you draw the line in government? Don't hire your own capacity, or your own company. I mean, um, maybe your company is the only one that does something that the government needs done badly. How do you do that? Well, let's talk a little bit about gifts versus bribes, and we want to talk about a thing called the New York Times test. And the New York Times test is pretty straightforward. It says, okay, whatever you're doing, are you willing to have a reporter from the New York Times watching you as you're doing it and asking you questions and writing down your answers and then writing an article about it? And if you're okay with that, then it ought to be okay pretty much to do whatever you want to do, maybe. So here's the New York Times test, and let's throw out a few possible situations and see where it might be a go or a no-go. Lunch at Five Guys paid for by a sales rep. Wow, how about that? I don't know whether you all have Five Guys in your neighborhood. I've got one about 3 miles away, and hey, mighty good French fries, not bad hamburger. And I used to go there every once in a while. Always buy my own lunch, never went there with a sales rep, but I could imagine somebody going there with a sales rep if somebody's, talking to somebody, oh, I need to get a new order of whatever I need, depending what my business might be. Maybe it's just printing ink. Maybe this sales rep is somebody who's been a buddy of yours for 20 years. Uh, so are there ethical issues there? Well, you just ask yourself, would it be okay if New York Times person were sitting next to us and listening in and writing about what we're talking about? And if you figure that'd be okay, then it looks like that would be an okay thing from an ethical standpoint. Well, all right. So here's another situation. What if you go to the dinner at the best restaurant in town with the sales rep? Same buddy you've had for 20 years, but sales rep said it's my turn to buy this time. You bought last time, or last time I forgot my billfold and you paid. This time, let me make up for that. Is that okay? Well, once again, you have to decide. But the interesting thing is not what actually happens, but what's perception. Is perception reality and vice versa? Wow. Wow. What about dinner at the best restaurant paid for by splitting the bill in half? Well, that's a little bit better unless you don't drink anything or unless the sales rep orders the salad and you order the filet mignon and a bottle of $100 wine. Then well, and then if you get a special deal, um, who knows? Tickets to the Super Bowl paid for by a sales rep after you've completed the sale. That have anything to do with the sale? What if it's 1 week later? What if did the rep mention to you that if you buy from him, you'll get tickets to the Super Bowl? Hmm, interesting. Uh, what would the New York Times think about that? Donation from an industry association to a political candidate is okay to do that? Some do that. Lots of them do that. Um, Political candidate who will act in their best interest, whether it's the solar industry, whether it's the coal industry, whether it's whatever industry, in the Wall Street, whatever. Um, Certainly seems to be happening these days. No question that the fossil fuel industry has made a few donations to a few politicians these days. Is that okay? What about a donation to a political action committee? Is that different from directly donating to a candidate? Political action committee then makes the donations to whatever candidate they happen to be doing political action for, if that candidate does what their political action committee believes is the right thing. Like the political action committee for protecting the environment or something like that. Is it okay if you get a company from somebody who wants to protect the environment and you take a donation from them, promising that, yes, you will do everything you possibly can to do good for the environment, and especially since that's right there in the ethical canons that you're going to do good for the environment. So is that okay? What about a trip to Costa Rica for a consultant paid for by a wind machine contractor? Very interesting. That's kind of interesting. This comes up right now. In 2 days, I'm going to be on my way to Costa Rica to see a friend of mine down here who builds windmills. And they put in a couple hundred megawatts of wind. I'm paying my own way down, but it's going to be nice to see him. But if they paid me, would that be okay? Well, I guess if I were doing consultant for him and they needed me to come down and analyze their installation and make sure that it and inspect it, I suppose I would charge for my expenses. So that would be okay. But then again, what if I do a few side trips? What about the ethics of that? Anyway, I'm going down and pay for my own side trips and hope to visit with my buddy anyhow. And I'm not going to feel any ethical issues. But Costa Rica is a nice place, by the way. So, Canon 5, let's go here. Let's see. We're still on track. Political contributions must be unconditional. Bid on credentials, not price. Contingency fees only if the judgment will not be compromised. No fake credentials. Give credit where credit is due. Advertising must be dignified. Oh, really? Okay, no indiscriminate criticism. Use employer tools for personal use only with permission. Okay. Yeah, I have a grandson who's an engineer, and his employer was happy as a lark for him to take home a 3D printer to print some stuff out on Saturdays. And so I guess as long as the employer liked it, my grandson's perfectly happy with that. He loves 3D printers. He's been playing with them since he was about 12 years old. So, well, let's look at some of the issues that might. What's the black side of the blue side? How is merit established? We kind of talked about that before, didn't we? How do you establish merit? How do you convey your reputation? Do you put an ad saying, I'm the best? Maybe it's okay to list the jobs you've done successfully, but is it okay to trash your competition in the process of trying to say how good you are? Interesting. The proper use of social media. Wow, wow. Yeah, this has really been interesting, hasn't it? I remember way back when they first started social media, I thought, wow, now we can get things right because you don't have to pay a whole lot of money to advertise. You can just say what you think now, and the people who don't have a lot of money can finally get their opinions recognized. But boy, look where that's gone. Uh, Social media is I can't believe where it's gone. It's nice, but there's some really unfortunate stuff going on there. What are examples of unfair competition? Yeah, think about it. What are examples of unfair competition? I remember being a part of forming a company, an electrical contracting group, company, we decided to back in the 2005 era when four different hurricanes hit the Boca Raton, Florida area. We decided that we're going to get in the business of installing battery backup photovoltaic systems for people who are tired of having to wait in line at the gas station to get gasoline for their gasoline generators. When we did that, there were no other PV people around, and other people were interested. And we decided if these people are interested, we had better offer training to them to make sure they do the job right. Because there's plenty of work for everybody. And if anybody comes out there and does the job wrong, it's going to make it look bad for everybody. And it's very interesting how people came and we just got along fine, and we got along very well with all of our competitors. Didn't have any issues about price fixing, anything like that, because we all somehow or other just seemed like the right thing to do. And there was plenty out there for everywhere. But are there examples where the competition would be unfair? When's it okay to change engineers on a job? Well, it is okay, and there are rules to follow. Just need to make sure if you get over your head, that the worst thing to do is hang in there. If you can't do it, you got to find somebody else. But then you got to make sure you disclose everything you've done. What circumstances might cause a need for a change? Let's look at the FIU bridge collapse in Miami. This was an interesting situation. And again, this is something that's been pretty well taken care of, but it's interesting. These were the things soon after that happened that I wrote down for this presentation, that the kind of questions that would probably be asked. The details were that 6 people were killed by 950 tons of concrete falling. This is a bridge collapsing across I think it was either 4 or 6 lane road in southwestern Miami near Florida International University. And this was back in 2018. And of course, when something like that happens, the National Transportation Safety Board gets out there and they do lots of investigating. And a year later, 2 years later even, they didn't have very many conclusions yet. But what you know is that the method of construction was very carefully scrutinized. The design activity, including the bidding, would be carefully scrutinized, and indeed it was. The procurement activity will be carefully scrutinized. These were predictions, and indeed they were. Construction activity will be carefully scrutinized. Yes, it sure was. Permitting and inspection activity were carefully scrutinized. Oh boy, was it ever. Count on lots of hearings, lots of litigation, and ethical challenges, and this thing was full of it. And there are specific webinars that various folks are giving on this particular incident because it was quite a situation. So I'm not casting judgment here. I'm just casting in observations of how this thing came about after the accident happened. The president of this institution was a very good friend of mine. As far as I'm concerned, he still is. Don't see him much anymore. But I've never had a chance to chat with him about his take on this whole thing. But certainly was an interesting situation. Here's where you can read about it. The Miami Herald has really been covering this thing for years and years, and there's a lot of material put away. But again, it's the kind of stuff that, boy, if you're not careful, these are the dilemmas you find yourself in. And maybe this is part of the cost benefit analysis. If you figure, well, we can do this cheaper. Well, what's the penalty if we do it cheaper, but then we don't get the benefit? So a lot of ethics in here. Canon 6. Do not knowingly engage in a business that's fraudulent, dishonest, or unethical. Do not knowingly engage. Which one of these words should be emphasized, you know? How do you know for sure? I mean, maybe the business you've been in has been perfectly honest for a long time, and all of a sudden somebody comes along and says, well, I think we're going to try this. Scrupulously honest in control of spending money, zero tolerance for bribery, fraud, and corruption, vigilant where bribery and gratuities are institutionalized. You know, there have been some countries in Africa, for example, where uh, the word was that if you didn't bribe somebody, you wouldn't get a job there. Well, does that mean that if you're the best in the world and you're the only ones who should be doing the work, is it okay then that you bribe them because at least you get it done right? Yeah, that's tough. That is one tough call here. Uh, Transparency in project procurement and execution. Yeah, sounds like a pretty good thing to do. Encourage use of zero tolerance certifications. Yeah, that sounds pretty good too, doesn't it? Okay, that's the black side. What about the blue side? Yeah, knowingly. Maybe tricky, huh? What if you do discover something? Well, we saw some of that back with the Fukushima, didn't we? You do something, or the Challenger, or the collapse of the bridge in up in Baltimore, or the oh my goodness, a lot of recent things. The Minneapolis bridge, the bridge in Miami. What if you discover what's going on? What do you do? What are you going to need? What's it going to cost to fix it? And if gratuities are institutionalized, if everybody pays them for everything, then is it okay? If they have a scale, like kind of like tips in a restaurant? I mean, is it okay if everybody does it? And especially if the one most qualified is the one who pays the most to make sure it gets done right? Well, where are the ethics here? What if a client doesn't want a disclosure of costs? Hmm. Another one probably could be reasons for that, though, right? Zero tolerance certifications, are they guaranteed? Or how are they? Good question. Well, okay, that's Canon 6. That's this ASCE. That's what they're saying that they were supposed to do to be good out there and do the right job. Canon 7. Some more details here. Keeping current. Everybody, well, that's what you're doing today, right? Staying current. That's kind of old stuff, but maybe a new look at it. Engage in professional practice. Continue education courses. Reading technical literature. Attending professional meetings. My guess is probably almost everybody out there is a member of something, either IEEE, ASCE, NSPE, uh, ASES, who knows? uh, but we tend to like to join organizations just to keep up with what's going on. So that's one way. Another way is to encourage your employees to become registered. Another way is encourage employee professional development, no matter whether they get registered or not. Keep getting smarter, keep studying, keep learning, never stop. Now, doesn't this always happen? Well, interestingly enough, I have seen companies where they seem to, when they find that somebody's very good at a particular job, then they discourage them from learning anymore because they don't want them to move out of that job. They want to stay there and keep doing it right. Well, maybe that's okay as long as they keep paying them more money for doing it right. But so, there's some interesting twists here on encourage employee professional development. Appropriate job titles, salary ranges, fringe benefits. The uninteresting question for you coming up in a minute along these ranges. For example, why'd you choose this course? Huh? I'll let you answer that yourself. Price, of course, is right because I know that our host is a very ethical gentleman. Um, but you always have reasons for choosing a course, hoping that it'll you get some benefit out of it, and I do hope you get some. We would call this the cost benefit analysis instead of the cost benefit analysis. I hope you do get some benefit out of this. Um, Everyone registered can be an interesting idea. What could be a drawback of a professional engineering organization that has everybody in the organization registered? Well, you can think of a few. It's nice to have a few folks there that just do your drawings for you. Otherwise, everybody's going to have to be sitting there and doing the drawings and whatever. But here's the kicker. Can a title ever substitute for salary? Had a situation, I'm going to ask you a question on this one. And this is kind of a question that has no right answer, but I'm just asking for opinions. This is something happened in my situation a while back, maybe almost 10 years ago almost now. We had some work done on our building. And it was a matter of checking the integrity of the exterior finish. And so there was a scaffolding and the tap, so you tap on the concrete to see whether the stucco is in good shape or maybe there's something rusty underneath it and so forth. And I noticed a young man coming in with a brand new tool belt. And you know how the electricians do that. They hire an electrician as long as all their tools are dirty, and they take their Klein's pliers and they hold it by one handle. And if the other handle drops, then they know that it's been used a lot. So therefore, that guy's hired. Well, this guy had all new tools, and he gave me his business card, and he was a senior engineer. And his credentials were that he had passed the engineering intern exam. That's a pretty nice title. And is that ethical? It's a big engineering company, and I always wondered about that. And I mean, I have some thoughts on my own, but how do you all feel about that? Let's take a break here. Is it okay for somebody who does not have a PE to have the title of senior engineer in a company that has a fair amount of employees? How do you feel about that? I'm going to open my participant box, and I'm not just trying to make sure that everybody's awake, because I know that everybody here is ethical and you would never fall asleep on purpose unless you needed it. And if you need it, that's okay too. Uh, let's just see. Here's a couple. Come on. Open, open, open. Here we go. Art's still here. Topic, political development plans and other gifts from other countries and businesses. Ah ha ha. Herman, I think we're on the same page here. Roger, no, that's not allowed in the states in which I'm registered. Okay. Um, Yeah, it seems like it shouldn't be allowed, and I'm not sure whatever happened here. I wasn't comfortable with it. I mean, I recognized exactly what was happening. I mean, he sees something and he had his phone and he call in right away to ask somebody, okay, here's what I got. I'll take a picture and I'll show you. It's like having a robot arm out there helping you out. But with the title of senior engineer, mm, I'm not sure that's the best way to advertise a company. So, and anyway, thanks, Roger, for your comment there. And I'm guessing, uh, again, this is one where there's no right answer. And a lot of times that's the ethical dilemma. There's no one right answer that always works. And this is one where it's just not sure. Let's move to Canon 8. What do we got? Oh, we're good on time. All persons are treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. Okay, there's some folks, things have been said about things like that. No discrimination, harassment, in connection with professional activities. Endeavor in good faith to include diverse perspectives in the planning and performance of their professional services. All right. Uh, what's the person? For example, could a person be an animal? Okay, let's see. Somebody came up here. Let's see what we got. Uh, Okay, let's see. Use the senior engineer title. Not okay if used for discipline which is subject to license, but okay for unlicensed engineer disciplines, like an aerospace engineer. Hey, good point. Very, very good point. Um, a corporate situation. No reason why, where you're not expected to be licensed or you're not expected to be registered, um, and you're an engineer for your whole life. Well, if you're a university professor and you're not the PE, but you go on to, yeah, yeah, good point. I can imagine that in a lot of situations, but if the implication is in a licensed situation, then you need to be a little careful. Jerome, good point. Appreciate you passing that along. Okay. So all three persons are treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. So, okay, as long as we talk about persons, we're going to build a road through this forest, which is a local place where the only collection of a certain particular animal live in the entire country of the United States. And those poor animals are just going, that's it. Tough luck, guys. Yeah, so maybe we need to extend this definition out a little bit. Maybe animals, maybe they should get some credit. Certainly, there's plenty of animal groups that would say that they'd love to see a little more credit for animals. So, okay, what about the environment? I mean, certainly we depend on the environment as people for our own survival. So if we're bad to the environment, is that the kind of the equivalent of being bad to people and on a larger scale? Hmm, interesting. So maybe that's part of treating persons with dignity, respect, and fairness by also treating animals and the environment with dignity, respect, and fairness. As a competitor, are they people? Are they, I mean, like really, seriously, are they people? Um, maybe they are. Corporations. Well, there's a law that says corporations are people. And I've seen corporations go bankrupt. I suppose that's what because of a definition of death. So if they live and die, I don't know if they breathe. Conscience. I don't know. Personally, I'm not real big on corporations being classified as people. But does it apply here in this? All persons are treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. I don't have a problem treating a corporation with fairness. I would like to be treated with fairness by corporation as well. That seems like a fairly reasonable exchange. Uh, Future generations, how about them? They're not even here yet, but if things that we do affect them, are we treating them with dignity, respect, and fairness? Hmm. Well, just so we think about that. Everybody makes up their own mind on this one, but it certainly could be a part of this particular point. Um, Machines and robots. Wow, that's getting really into it. I mean, if you look at what the robots are doing, I've heard some of the Chinese robots now, they've what have they done with them? Made their bellies soft or something so that they're more like people? Um, I don't know. I don't really like to think that a machine is a person because I think it's a little different, but it's becoming a real ethical thing, and this becomes machines, not just robots, but things like uh, these big data centers and all the energy they use, which could be used by other people for other things. Uh, Very interesting trade-off and some incredible ethics involved there. Um, how about countries? What Puerto Rico? What about some of these countries where hurricane hits them and well, tough luck, guys. Jamaica got a pretty bad hit down there in Montego Bay. I didn't see that we were out there helping them out a whole lot. Used to be once upon a time somebody down the Caribbean got hit with a nasty hurricane. Generally, the United States was there to kind of give them a helping hand. Uh, what are the ethics involved? And again, is this engineering? Are this engineers supposed to be the ones who do this? Is somebody else supposed to do it? Somebody supposed to hire engineers to do it? Hmm. Yeah. Interesting situation, isn't it? Let's move now to a slightly different topic. Ecofeminism. We were talking about ecology. We're talking sustainability. And what's the ethics viewpoint? So here's an interesting book here. Ecofeminism, and this is where Jane Caputi comes in because she is the love of my life. She teaches these kinds of topics at local university here, and so she is always happy to call things like these to my attention. So I have to share them. I want to share them with you and make sure that you're aware that there are other approaches that are very similar to the approaches engineers use that we should probably know about. And his definition here by the Karen Warren, that ecofeminism is the position that there are important connections between how one treats women, people of color, and the underclass on one hand, and how one treats the non-human natural environment on the other. That's right on page 3 of this book. That's kind of interesting because this is things, some of these things are things we're not supposed to talk about anymore. I'm just pointing out these are things that are out there to be care about. I think they're important uh, to think about and to know about. Do we want to just hold our hands over our eyes and say, oh, no, 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 we never heard about this stuff. And even if we did, we don't want to know about it. Well, let's just take a quick look at it, and then you can decide whether you want to learn more about it or not. But in any case, there's some interesting thinking going on here. Um, Good example here is water and how sexism makes women and men differently vulnerable with environmental degradation. And that's simply because in the Southern Hemisphere, women and children do most of the water collection. You don't just turn on your faucet to get water. You get your water bucket and you leave the house and go on out there and try to find some clean water that you can drink and use. And the more contamination, the further you have to go to find that water. And so you have to walk further. And the further you go, the more health and safety risks you encounter. And look at the word walk. We are talking walk. We are not talking about driving your car, your motorcycle, whatever. We are talking about walking. Okay. And so, interesting thing. Obviously, as we pollute things. So here we get some things about that relate back to some of the canons we've just gone over. That nothing like polluted resources as a health risk. So what is said here is that Earth must be recognized as a body that must be respected, like a living being, Mother Earth. Earth is not an it. We talk about the Anthropocene, where humans will control nature. Well, that's a very interesting concept. Let's see what some famous environmentalists say about that. Rachel Carson, sorry. I remember hearing about this from Rachel. I grew up with DDT. My mother used to spray it on her arms to keep getting bit by mosquitoes when we were out fishing up in northern Minnesota 70 years ago. And but Rachel kind of heard about DDT as not being all so good for you, and she kind of went out on and wrote about this stuff. And one of the things she said is control of nature is conceived in arrogance. Uh, who are we to think that we can control nature when nature really is in control of us when you think about it? We try to control nature, but we can't control whether the sun's going to rise or set in the morning. We can maybe if you put in a room darkening shades, but that's about as close as we can get, unless we live underground. Um, so Rachel Carson is one of these folks who did some pretty serious thinking back in 1963. That's 2 years after I graduated from high school. I remember that still. Um, Here's a lady, a little more recent. And this lady says today we're faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humanity stops threatening its life support system. Who is this lady? Well, I happen to have my something covering it up, but there you see her name, and I regret that I'm not able to pronounce it, but she's not just some old who knows who. This is a lady who's the founder of the Greenbelt movement over in Africa, and she actually won the 2004 Nobel Peace Prize. So she had some interesting things to say. Pretty bright gal. A little more ecofeminist thoughts that just fit into the picture to complete the man is a part of nature, and his war against nature is inevitably a war against himself. Our friend Rachel again. Hmm. Think about that. Interesting feedback loop, isn't it? Very interesting. And, whether or not you like meat, chicken is one of my favorite foods, but the whole idea of buying caged chicken that's been in a cage just is not appealing to me. And I don't know why it's less appealing for that than to buy a free range chicken, but somehow at least that free range chicken has had a little more chance to get out there. And I don't know. But a lot of people are more or less serious, but cruelty to animals is a serious thing. And for a lot of people, it is a really big deal. And I think they deserve some level of respect for that. And, you know, who are we to know? This is an interesting picture of Mother Nature. Uh, the Inuits, these are the folks who live like in northern Baffin Island. When it gets cold in the wintertime, they don't have a whole lot to do. So they do some very interesting soapstone carvings. And this is a very nice little carving by this Inuit artist back in 1982 time frame. Um, and you can kind of see the kind of putting Mother Nature all into one, that she's the one who takes care of everything, all the animals and everything. So in any case, we're not really out of time. We've got 20 more minutes left if we want to talk some more, but this does conclude the material of the course. The idea was that we would have enough time to converse, and if not, there's still time to take the little quiz that our host has for you to take, so you can get the credit for the 2 credits of the course. But in any case, that's all we've got here for the moment. And I say it's lunchtime, it's closer to dinner time, but I said lunchtime because if I give this in the morning and I show this picture here, a lot of times it makes them hungry because that's that lake trout that we were looking at in the very beginning, what it looks like when it's fried over an open fire. So in any case, if you order the slides, you get the full text of the October 26, 2020 ASCE Code of Ethics. And otherwise, that's it for the material. So let me just go back here and see if anybody wants to go back to anything else and pay a little more attention to it. Otherwise, this could be the end of it. Let's see, chat. We've got one. There's one. Maybe I wonder if this is something here in Q&A that I've not talked about yet. Herman, it sounds like you enjoyed it. I appreciate your comment. This is, I have to say, one of my favorite courses. It's not heavy duty engineering, but it's heavy duty thinking. And my contention is that thinking is something that we as engineers need to keep on doing. Artificial intelligence may be nice, but let's don't rule out human intelligence because I think we need to hang on to that. From my standpoint, as an 82-year-old guy, it's a use it or lose it thing. I find that things I don't use, they don't work too well anymore. I try to use my brain, I try to think, and take a lot of pride in trying to do that. I try to exercise, stuff like that. So let me encourage you to do the same. Use your brains, use your judgment, use your best judgment, be good engineers, all that kind of stuff, just like any old good grandpa would say to his grandchildren or children. And thanks for coming. And like I say, I will remain online until I see that other folks have signed off. In case anyone has anything more they want to talk about. Otherwise, I'm sure that our friend Hisham, the host, would love to have your evaluations of this so that he can evaluate whether we should try it again one day. And with that, I wish you all a happy holiday season, and I'll be checking to see if there's any more comments before we wrap it up. Thanks, Roger. Thank you, David. You're very welcome. If you haven't signed off yet, our host has another webinar. If you want to do some discussion with a little more engineering and a little more looking at the future, we've got another webinar. You'll be on his mailing list, and this is coming up scheduled for mid-December. So if you're around and have something to do, uh, be nice to have you back. All right, Bart, enjoy the quiz. Should be easy. Hardy, thank you as well. And Doug, thank you. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing the screen because I don't want to get anybody to get too hungry looking at that delicious lake trout because it really was good.